Hey everybody, here to go over some basic design principles in relation to developing our video essays. One of the things that obviously one of the core tasks of this assignment is to develop a slideshow. And while developing slideshows is something that perhaps we've already done a number of times before, or if you're brand new to slideshows, um, it isn't often that you get sort of instruction or guidelines. I, I know that I never really received them. I just did research on it and looked it up. And so, in order to give us a little bit of a foundation of strategies we can use to develop our slideshows for our video essays, and this is going to primarily talk about the sort of visual aspects of the slides. I put together this little design principles slideshow. So, just to give us some idea of things we can do when it comes to designing our slides for the most impact we can make in terms of our video essays. So without further ado, and to not take up too much of your time, as I imagine you're just about sick of seeing me on these videos, I'll get right to the slideshow here. Share my screen as always. One second, here we go. Okay, turn captions on. And I think we should be good to go now. All right. So like I said, really the goal of this slideshow is just to talk about basic design principles and outlining some sort of key tips, strategies that I've researched and that I find make for the most effective slideshows. Not just according to my opinion. This is based on all kinds of research and articles that I've taken a look at and read, and I just kind of distilled it down. You'll see a lot of kind of overlap. I mean, one of the basic premises of effective design is sort of simplicity and clarity. So those ideas are going to be, a lot of times we think when we're designing something, more is better, or, as much having as much action as possible to sort of, keep our viewers or our audience's interest is something that we should do, and it's usually not the case. More often than not, you don't want your slideshow or your video essay, for that matter, to overtake the kind of ideas that you're putting forth. So you want to try and strive for a balance. So those ideas of simplicity, clarity, balance, those are things that are really going to sort of underlie almost all of these basic design principles here. So first one is, well, clarity and simplicity. So I have some example slides on the right. They're from a variety of different that I've just pulled from the internet. They're from a variety and from the articles that I was looking at. And this obviously on the right is an example of a slide that does not feature clarity and simplicity, despite the fact that it has the word simplification circled on it. It's just we have so much going on. We have foreground images, and they're not on any kind of alignment. They're not, the composition of the slide is sort of all over the place. It's just really messy and busy. And what happens is your audience ends up kind of jumping to all the different elements and gets distracted. It gets sort of lost within the slide, and this is obviously something that we don't want to, we don't want to happen. We have arrows going every which way. We have images that are repeated. We have a background image as well as multiple design elements and multiple fonts and shadows on the lettering, and it's quite confusing. So keeping things clean, keeping things simple is just much more conducive to connecting with your audience, right? So here we have a kind of slide that, we have very sort of clear and simple information. This is talking about, I guess, electricity. So 451 billion of hidden costs, 370 billion annual US consumption of electricity. We have a very sort of simple color scheme. but it's attractive, it's easy to follow, it's kind of interesting. It has a sense of style rather than a sense of chaos, but at the same time, it just really has a sense of clarity and simplicity. Because the thing to remember when you're creating your slides is that, right, you're also have a narration, right? So what this 451 billion versus the 370 billion means and what the context of those things are is obviously something that the person who is narrating the slide or who is giving the presentation is going to talk about. And so that's why you don't want to just overload your slides with text, and we'll get to that. Don't forget, 50% of the work is going to be done by your narration. So it's not like you need everything on your slides. If anything, the slides are just kind of enhancements to the ideas that you're putting forth. Um, so second thing is to avoid overload. And this is, you could very much look to that first, example of a complicated slide as an overloaded slide. And here again, you have kind of the same thing, right? All kinds of different fonts. There's ideas all over the place. It's just way too busy and it's an overloaded slide. So we want to avoid that overload. Again, keeping things simple. Sorry, that slide came out a little blurry, that image. But here we have just one background image that's sort of blurred to the back so it doesn't interrupt. We have just two key points of text, and just a clean header. It's not overloaded. Again, you know the presenter, you want the slideshow to be reliant upon, it shouldn't be independent of your narration, right? They should be working together, right? So in other words, we're not sure exactly what this slide is all about or the importance of this slide because we need the narration. We need the presenter to do that. And that's good. You want that symbiotic relationship between your slides and your own narration. So avoiding overloading the slides is a key thing. Third principle is just to have a sense of balance. Again, something else I brought up earlier. Here we have only one image, but we have a ton of text. So much so that the text takes up almost the entire slide. It's as if somebody copied and pasted their introduction directly onto a slide, and it's just too much language. I mean, what is going to happen is your audience is going to end up just reading the slide. And if you're reading what's on the slide, it sort of makes the slide less conducive to sort of developing the meaning. The slide just suddenly becomes a kind of a text that you're reading, as opposed to a supplement to the ideas that you're putting forth. So we want to balance both text and image, right? So like here we have, a clean image, clean color scheme, and we have a good balance between text and image. So obviously the presenter or the narrator, the narration is going to be presenting the primary ideas connected with this slide orally, right? Through their narration or through their speaking. And then they just put a key quote here, from an outside source that maybe they felt really sort of captures some of the key ideas. So again, we have that clarity and simplicity. It's not overloaded. And we also have a balance between the textual aspects and the visual aspects within the slide. Fourth thing is contrast. Try to avoid bad contrast, right? So the best contrast is dark on light, but good contrast, you've seen me use it a lot. I use light on dark a lot. I just feel like light on dark is a little easier on the eyes. That's just my personal opinion. But things like light on light or, harsh colors, yellow on red, or bad, dark on dark. Those are situations in which things are not going to stand out and not going to be clear. So like if you remember from that last slide when we're talking about balance, you had the nice sort of clean white font on the sort of dark background. Very easy to read. You don't want a bunch of small text either. So contrast is important. Here again, we have a good contrast of light on darker color, a balance of image and text, simplicity. It's not overloaded. Okay. Fifth thing is consistency. Your overall your presentation should have, in some ways, the structure, an aspect of organization of presentations is that they have a certain consistency in design. So this is not one slide, this is a whole deck of slides, meaning it's 6 slides from a presentation. And they all sort of are using the same font. They all have this kind of the same color scheme going on. They have their headers are consistent. So there's a good consistency from slide to slide to slide to slide that lends a kind of what we call a kind of cogency to the video essay. It all seems connected. It doesn't mean you can't do quite different things from slide to slide. Like we have, you see the big idea slide here as an all red background that sort of changes or shifts the pattern, or the light bulb is the only slide here that just has an image on it. That's fine. You can play with that, but you want to have a pattern or a consistent sort of style, if you will, that sort of keeps everything together from slide to slide to slide. Okay, here's another sort of example of consistency, right? So here we have 3 very different images, but they all are sort of held consistent with the kind of the composition of the dark band through the middle of the slide with the white text. And so there's a lot of ways to create consistency. If you have very different images, then you want to maybe find a sort of textual element that will show consistency throughout, or a header element, or a particular font, if you have wildly different images through with each slide. um, Sixth thing is alignment, and you heard me use this word from the very first slide we looked at that was kind of a chaotic mess. And it's just about having objects on the slide, or elements of a slide, be in line. So if you look on the far right here, we have setup, drawing, editing, managing, plotting, and all these things are kind of, I mean, it's kind of ironic because this is a presentation about AutoCAD, sort of, which I think is like an architectural software or application. And where lines and measurements and straight lines are really important in architecture. And we have the slide where all the menu on the right is all sort of disjunct and thrown off, and it's distracting. It's sort of it creates a kind of a lack of sense of sort of clarity, a lack of sense of balance. So keeping things aligned. Obviously, here you see on the left, all the boxes are sort of out of line. On the right, it's just easier on the eyes. It doesn't sort of overload your audience, if you will, or give them something that's really hard to look at or deal with. Um, so alignment is an important thing to think about. How does this happen in like a real slide? Well, here you can see this. We have quite a bit of information happening on this slide, but everything is kind of aligned and consistent and balanced, right? So even though we have a lot of information, it's all on certain axes, right? So, you have the total number, active social accounts, total number of social accounts, active mobiles, all on the same line. You have the header, you have all the images of the same size, they're all on a line, and then you have the different sort of numerical values, the 2.08 billion, the 29%, the 1.69 billion, the 23%, all on the same line, both vertically and horizontally. Everything has a kind of balance and alignment to it. Seventh thing, and these are all things just to sort of keep in mind. It's not like, oh, well, you can't ever have something that's sort of, out of alignment. These are just things to keep in mind as you develop your slides. Proximity, keeping things, and this is sort of about composition, right? Obviously, the Adidas logo doesn't really make any sense if it was completely spread out all over the place. Having things sort of together, things that relate together, should be near one another. They should be proximate to one another. But so bad proximity is where your eye is sort of going all over the screen, right? It's not really able to follow a sort of a logical sequence of things. Um, so right here we have, in order for the eye to continue to move across the screen and view your chosen images and text, they should have close proximity. Otherwise, the eye will stop in the wrong places. Now, our temptation, right, is normally we read left to right or top to bottom when we think about sequence. So you can think about textual relationships, of course, that way in terms of textual objects on your slides, but also visual objects. Which visual objects do you want your reader? If I'm going to be talking about something related to an image, you know, if I'm first going to be talking about something related to a particular image, I'm going to probably want to put that image either on the left or on the top or both. Whereas if I'm talking about something else later, it's like the second or third thing I'm going to talk about. I don't want to put that at the top because it's more likely going to be at the bottom. Obviously, you can refer to things when you're narration. You can see if we take a look at figure two. But proximity is a way to think about the kind of sequencing and logic of the objects on your slide and how they relate to one another. Um, and then here we have a kind of proximity that even though we have a kind of creative use of the sequence and, if you will, the timing of the slide, the sequencing of the slide, here we have these numbers that provide us, and we're still going from top to bottom, but we're kind of curving around. So we have a playful use of how there's a flow, certain flow. They're talking about flow anyways, but we have a sort of creative use of sequencing here, but it's handled in a very clear and simple way that we're not struggling what to read first because we have one, two, three, four, five, and then optimization flow is the kind of header of the slide, right? So even though there's a really creative, interesting sort of um, you know unusual use of proximity and sequencing here, it's handled well. It's handled clearly. Finally is personalization. Don't forget to have fun with this. Use your sense of style, create what you want to create. So just because you're keeping things simple and keeping things clear and avoiding overload and so on, and consistency, alignment, and balance and contrast, doesn't mean you can't still have your own style, right? So, maybe there's particular, colors and, maybe you want to use black and white images, maybe whatever it might be. You can have a very, even though things are quite simple, you can have really unique and distinct styles from slide to slide or presentation to presentation, and try to have fun with that. I mean, part of you creating a video essay should be, being you have sort of further opportunities in terms of the visual and in terms of audio to use your creativity than you do, say, or writing on a page. So take use of that, and you can really kind of get some creative ideas out there, and perhaps even have a little bit of fun doing it. So those are the basic design principles I have for you. Kept this within about 20 minutes, under 20 minutes, and that is probably a first for me. Um, Oh, stuck in the share screen. Sorry about that. So, good luck with the video essays. I hope that this has been a useful kind of strategy, methods and strategies, tips for designing our video essays, at least the slideshow aspect of our video essays. So, feel free to ask any questions you may have, as this is a video workshop. Um, and I'll see you next time, and look forward to seeing the workshop drafts of our video essays. All right, take care.